Welcome to the Deeks.ai podcast, where Wake Forest innovators unpack the real-world magic of artificial intelligence through candid conversations. I'm Michael Ferrari.
I'm Ryan Scholl.
Please join us as we explore how artificial intelligence is transforming work across campus, one fascinating story at a time.
Welcome, Deeks.ai listeners. We have an extraordinarily special treat for you today. You get to be a fly on the wall listening to a conversation between some of the brightest minds at Wake Forest. We're going to treat you to a discussion about generative artificial intelligence effect on learning. I want to say special thanks to the School of Business for letting us borrow their audio equipment, and also mention that this is a wonderful partnership with the Center for the Advancement of Teaching. So with that, I'm going to introduce our guests. From the Center for Advancement Teaching, we have Assistant Provost and Executive Director of the Center for Advancement Teaching, Betsy Barre. We have Will Fleeson, our Special Advisor to the Provost for Artificial Intelligence and a Professor of Psychology. Tobias Flattery is a Professor in the Department of Philosophy. And our newest guest, Erin, a Teaching Professor in the Writing Program. Now, I know everybody has heard in the past from Betsy, Will, and Tobias on the podcast. Erin is our newest guest, and she has written a wonderful essay that is available on the Humanities Institute website. So if you want to understand some more of her thinking on artificial intelligence, you can check that. And Tobias also has a little piece in that as well. So I think some of our other, Ryan Shirey and Carter Smith. So a lot of past Deeks.ai guests in there. So welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining in this conversation. So I'm going to start with a topic that I'd like for us to talk about, then I'm going to get out of the way and let our brilliant minds discuss this. But
You're really building us up here.
You told me this was the averagest minds.
Well, I told you a lot of things. Had to get you in the room, Will.
Yeah.
We are in higher education. We are at this crossroads. Artificial intelligence has been around, generative artificial intelligence has been around the public about 3.5 years. It seems like decades. Things change on a daily basis. So I want to talk about the speed of adoption in higher education. Some people say it's driven by the students because they're just jumping in and they're trying things. Others say the faculty have to take a very active role, but they are considering what they do. And then where does the administration fit in this? What policies and how do they have to define what the education and curriculum? So I just want us to start thinking about where do each of these different populations, where are they right now? Where are we going with that?
So are you interested in the question of, are we moving fast enough, or just how fast are each of these groups moving?
Let's talk about where everybody is.
Yeah, well, I think, I don't know that any of these groups are monoliths. So I think that speaking from, I'm going to identify as somebody in the administration in some ways. I think that a lot of folks in the administration have different views on this, and some are really eager to say we need to move faster, and others are saying, well, we don't know enough yet, so we're not really sure, or we want to let the faculty lead, or we need to figure out what students want and get more information before we make decisions, which I think is generally a good position to be in. And of course, the faculty, as always, as good faculty, disagree very much about this and thinking about how we should be thinking about AI in education. And even the students now, we're learning more as well, that there's movements of students who are resisting in interesting ways and other students who are, dive in and use it all the time. So I'm not sure, it's very hard for me to say where these groups are. I mean, there are averages probably, in terms of usage, but now that it's been around for 3 or 4 years, I think most people have at least engaged a little bit with AI, so there's not as big of a gap as I think there was early on. So I guess I don't know if that's enough of an answer to your question, but I would say there's still a lot of diversity of positions on this within each of those groups.
It's a jagged frontier.
That's right, yeah.
Of opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some people are very excited about AI, want to move faster. I think some people have legitimate concerns about it. And I think people are all over the place. I think most people just feel like there's so much to know, and they don't know enough, and they want more guidance. They want to know more. My opinion is that now is the time where faculty need to have discussions about what they want AI to be on Wake Forest campus. How can we protect the things we value most about education, and how can we grow the things we value most about education? I think it has to be a faculty-led discussion. Start.
Yeah, I agree with that. And from my perspective, I work most closely with first-year students, almost exclusively with first-year students. And there was a very sharp moment in the spring of 22, I guess, when suddenly papers were coming in with like all the sort of identifying marks of the 19-year-old writer gone. About ChatGPT now. Yeah, that's what this looks like.
Yes, yes.
And so then I feel like there were a few early adopters, and it just took off so quickly. But initially, students really saw it as more of like a spell check on steroids. But now I'm hearing more and more from students that there's like this double-edged fear. They're both afraid to use it, partly because faculty have different policies and they're not sure what the consequences might be in different classes. They don't always fully understand what cognitive effort might be lost when they use it and why that might be valuable. But then there's also fear of like not using it, because now professors are used to seeing these really polished papers, and some will even say, I don't want your unedited draft, which to me is a little bit heartbreaking. Because students don't hear in that just don't have grammar mistakes. They hear, my voice isn't good enough. That is really concerning to me, that if they feel like they've got to always meet that super polished, version of writing, then that they're so eager to get to that they kind of skip the necessary labor on the front end.
Here's one other note that hasn't been mentioned that I think is pretty consistent across institutions, so talking to other faculty from other universities, is that on the speed of adoption point, which is that while faculty we're all divided in trying to figure this out, often the IT and IS wings or departments in universities are like in more or less full court press mode with rolling out the tools. I'm just stating that as an observation, not as a criticism.
Yeah.
But that does mean that, faculty, administration, students are like, well, what do I do with this? Is it good? Is it bad? How? In what ways? The tools are like there, and they're in your face in a way. And that also, it frames things in a certain way. So that's worth mentioning, at least, that there's, kind of a mismatch across many institutions between the adoption and the rollout with IT, IS parts of the institution and everybody else.
Yeah, but on this campus, I find the IS as being very responsive to thinking about how this is going to impact faculty.
Well, I just mean like, the next...
about other universities, but I think on this campus, we're fortunate. Because, for example, this whole thing with Google Docs, the Google Docs put it on there, put Gemini on there.
Google did it without telling us.
And IS got it removed, or even targeted removal.
That was the help me write feature.
The help me write feature.
Help me write feature, and that was removed within days.
Right.
And it was also targeted removed. So some people still have access to it, but the students don't. And so I think the IS department here has been pretty responsive.
I agree with that. And Ryan, I do not cast any blame. But what I mean is, remember, it was
Ryan's fault when it goes wrong.
Well, many faculty at Wake, again, even if we're more aligned than other institutions, all of a sudden we're rolling out Gemini Pro. We're rolling out this stuff. In fact, we're like, whoa, wait, what? It's there. So minimally, at least, that kind of.
Well, and I think part of that is the tools that we already use are making choices for the university that we are not making.
Right.
So this has often been the case in the library. Like the databases are just, we don't get a choice. We do not get a choice of whether to turn it on or off. And so if we have Google Docs, we sometimes don't get choices as a university. So we hope that our IT teams will communicate back to these companies that what we want them to slow down. And so that's important. But I also think the other interesting wrinkle here on college campuses is that, IT offices have multiple missions, not just the mission of supporting students, but also supporting the operation of the university. And one distinction I often make for students, or just when I talk about AI, is there's a difference between a work context, an employment context, and a learning context. Very, very different contexts. And so the thing about IT offices is they're also supporting workers to be more efficient. Like if you think about all the data messes that we have in higher ed that are just like, we spend hours and hours trying to fix data problems. Most faculty probably blissfully don't ever have to think about this.
That's my entire career.
Yeah, okay, well, that's true, fair enough. And social sciences, scientists do. But like, this is something that we want our IT office to say, hey, you in the registrar's office, AI might be helpful to you in the registrar's office. Here's the ways that it can be helpful. And so there is this it's not weird actually, but there is this tension. And so helping our offices that are supporting operations recognize that distinction is important for them to see that too, that there's a difference between when we're talking about operational, procedural work, and then when we're talking about students and learning, it's so different. And we should have different ways of thinking about AI in those contexts.
So let's focus on that learning. Okay, so yes, operational, business efficiency.
Yep.
That we can save that for the next time. But let's focus on that learning. What are the advantages that AI can provide, and what are the disadvantages? What do the students lose when AI is integrated in?
We're all looking at Will
Yeah. Will's got all the answers.
Yeah, I wish.
and Betsy.
The answer is always it depends. I mean, that's a cop-out answer, but
Okay, but what does it depend on?
A nice thing that we can be happy about is that this is actually an active, strong area of research. So there's actually a lot of research on this topic. And the research, you can basically summarize, I'll try to summarize it with 3 simple points here, but maybe one at a time. You can
Let's go.
see how far it goes, each one. The first point, and this is, I think, the simplest version of the answer, and there's more, it depends on coming, but the simplest version of the answer is, on the whole, AI in education makes people think better. In the end, their skills are improved by using AI over not using AI. So that's the sort of the overall message, which is really a nice message.
You want us to respond to that?
Betsy's waiting to respond to that.
I've talked a little about this before too. So it's from and in fairness, he is reading more of this than I have. But there are meta-analyses that are trying, because now we actually are having enough research that you can actually pull together multiple pieces of research and have meta-analyses. But the challenge, I think, with meta-analyses in these contexts is that so much depends on the details of how you're using it. Whenever anybody talks about using AI, it just is, I'm like, no, we can't have that conversation. You have to tell me exactly how they are using it. And so when you're pulling together these different studies, and yes, you can get on average, it's helping, but then I would want to know which are the studies that are showing the strong effect sizes and what exactly is happening with use when there's strong positive effect and what exactly is happening with use when there's not. Because I think my answer would be, it can help in certain contexts and used in certain ways. And I don't know how meaningful it is to say overall it helps.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's helpful if we're advocating for it.
Well, that's the second.
Yeah.
That's the second
Okay.
point. The second
Okay.
point is it can actually hurt or it can help depending on how you use it. And it looks like it's pretty clear. You can break it down into 2 ways of using it, which are simply, again, this is the simplistic view. This also is too simplistic, what I'm telling you here too. But it's just the overview. You could break it into active versus passive use.
Yeah.
So the active use is when you have it scaffold. So where it asks you questions, it gives you hints, where you're trying to learn something. The passive use is where you're having it do it for you. The active use is where you do repeated practice. And so you come back to it the next day and you do it again. You do it the third day. The passive use is you do it once, you're done, it's over. The active use is that you have metacognitive reflection, where you think about how much do you really know. The passive use is you just get the feeling that you know a lot without actually doing that kind of reflection. And it's clear that the active use of it makes huge increases in skills. Skills soar when people use AI actively versus just try to learn in the traditional ways, which is, read their textbook and underline and things like that. That using AI in that active way improves learning. Using it in the passive way actually decreases cognitive skills. So people actually produce better products, perhaps, in the short run, but they end up with worse skills by about the same amount that it helps in the active use. So it really depends on whether you're using that active versus passive use.
When you say skills soar, do you mean like what we really care about is long term?
Yeah.
Rather than short term expression of skills for immediate tasks, but this long term. So when you say skills soar, do you mean short or long term? Or both?
Yeah, so the meta-analyses look across both, but it seems like there's evidence in both cases. It's both short term and in the long run. I mean, it's all education. All education's.
Yes.
If you don't keep it up, you lose it.
Well,
Yeah.
And this, I think what's exciting about the new research is it's testing what we would expect from theory of what we know about how learning works. And so I think one thing I often say is that even prior than AI, if we thought about, before AI was sort of on the scene, is if we thought about the traditional way that we would teach in higher ed with a lecture, and students would think they were learning from a lecture, like, okay, this is good, this makes sense to me. they actually weren't learning as well as if we actually made them do the work and have conversations and do active learning. And so what Will has just described makes sense in terms of the theory of learning, that if students are actively engaged with metacognition, thinking about their learning, being asked questions, they're more likely to learn than if they're just passively processing information. So in some ways, it's not the AI itself that is doing the thing, it's the fact that the students are actively engaged in reflecting and thinking about. And so it's just as if you had a good teacher that created that context and those activities, AI is just doing that for them. So it makes sense that there would be more learning that would happen when the students are engaging in active reflection than if they are just passively getting information. But the question is whether students know that difference.
Well, also, what would motivate that? Because you can imagine there are plenty of classes where they do not care, right?
Nope.
It's a divisional, it's a lower division class. They just want to get through with a passing grade. There is no incentive to do active learning, especially if there's a way to do the passive part and still get the desired result, which is just the checkbox. And, you know, I was about to say degree works, but that's old. I think I'm wondering if any studies yet look at like how motivation plays into that. I'm not a social scientist, so I don't know how you'd measure that kind of thing or test for it. But how can you basically force a student to actively engage with it when there's no other motivation? I mean, I guess you can attach grades to it. I'm just like a little resistant to that because I feel like that's a lot of external motivation and not anything internal or intrinsic. So I'm just curious about, again, the details. Like if you're looking at majors or students who are already invested in a topic or a class, that's one thing and probably easier to, compel them to do some kind of active learning or they'll do it on their own. But I don't know how you do that if there's really no reason to. But a lot of the stuff that students learn in those foundational classes, they really need, not just in writing either.
That's why I think it's so critical that the departments this upcoming year, this is the moment for us to do it. This needs to be done at the departmental level because how you're going to do that in an English class is going to be different than how you're going to do it in a psychology class or a philosophy class. How do you get people interested in that? So.
I know.
They walk in the door like a virtual attack there. Well, 3 of us are philosophy majors. So, this is not a video episode. Both Betsy and I are philosophy.
Will and I are friends.
So I think this is why we have to have these discussions about how you're going to do that. That's what we need to talk about. How are you going to create your classes? And Betsy, of course, is going to be critical to these discussions. How do you create your classes and your curriculum as a whole so that we're encouraging that kind of active learning? Yeah.
Can I just add to what I think Erin was saying, or at least one way of putting it? So nobody here now, but I've heard lots of approaches offered that ultimately rely on the following kind of assumption, okay? If we tell students, these are the ways that you're allowed to use AI in this class, and these are the ways you're not, then when at the same time, many students believe that the way we're telling them not to use it involves significantly less time, effort, and those students believe that faculty can't reliably detect whether or not they use that way, then they're not going to use it that way, and that's just silly.
But that's the essential point. That's the essential point.
But I guess my point with stating it this way is that we can't assume that they will do it the way that we're telling them to do it if it's just easier to do it the other way, and if they'll get the same marks, the same,
No, they won't get the same marks. They'll get lower marks. But if they do it the other way, they'll get better marks. There's also studies showing that if you just have AI write your papers, you will get higher grades.
If you just have them, say that again?
If you just have AI write your papers, you will get about a half of a grade higher.
That's what we're saying. Okay.
That's the word. So if we can't tell the difference, they're going to use it, many students will be tempted and succumb to the temptation to use it in the ways they shouldn't. And so that's a big problem. And so whenever I hear can in these contexts, they can use it in this way that will be great. I think,
how do we
encourage them? How do we both encourage them motivationally? How do we cultivate? We can't. They come to us from high school, from a whole life of 17, 18 years, to have the motivation to do things in the way that involves struggle, difficulty, but that will lead to the kind of intellectual cultivation that will lead to a flourishing life. How do they get that motivation? And secondly, they're humans, and young humans, so they're still developing. So how do we make it harder to use things in the ways that will allow them to short circuit? I think these are like the twin challenges we face, and I don't know.
But these are urgent challenges.
Yes, they are.
Yes. Huge.
We're not, I think we're all in agreement about it. And I think I would say that the motivational piece, there are some things that are disciplinary based, but that I somewhat worry that leads to this if you just make your you just make your subject interesting enough, they'll do it. Which is like,
Yeah.
there's some truth. Some people could make a very interesting subject not interesting. So I know that there are cases where that happens. But for the most part, it's often the structural incentives that we have created in education generally, right, for our students. And that's a bigger thing that we need. And in part, it's their life and it's K through 12 and the way they think about achievement. And all that matters is they have to add more and more to their life. Like this is the biggest thing is like they just can't accept scarcity, and that and any time that they can pack more into their life, more extracurricular, more service, more opportunities. Yeah, the more things that I can pack in, the more successful I will be. Therefore, if I can cut corners in things that don't matter to me, and they might matter a little, like that's the thing too, is I think for a lot of our students, they kind of care about our classes.
Yeah.
Kind of.
But one even care a lot.
Yeah, but they make that they feel like it's the pressure that they have to be even more busy, and so they have to fit more in. They have to fit more in. I got to socialize. I got to make sure that I'm networking. I got to make sure I have these internships. And so as they're trying to fit more in, they're making strategic choices about where they spend their time. And so I don't know how we solve that, but it is, I think, not just disciplinary based. Like that's just a big structural thing about grades, about credentials. Those kinds of things. Well, how do we think about learning?
Yeah, this is not solving it at all. But in my first year writing classes, I've often framed discussions around AI as, frankly, matters of integrity. And not that there's one answer, but like they have to think about the kind of learner, the kind of person they want to be. And if they're presenting something that is partly or wholly written by AI, they have to make a decision that is okay for that situation. And it might be like if you're writing a note to the water company to turn off your water because you're moving, like who cares? But if you're applying for your dream job or you're applying for your dream professional school, like I get the pressure to like put in something really polished and perfect sounding. But on the other hand, like it's kind of like when you get those the pictures of your students when they come into the room and you're like, oh, there was a filter in that photo. Yeah, it's fine, but like how filtered do you want to present?
Ask them about like using AI and like dating apps, right? Yeah.
And so I think they have to think about like, how much can I polish this but still be me?
Yep.
And how much of it am I just presenting like a weird reflection?
Yeah, that's so.
And that usually, like they are very concerned about self-presentation. That is a language they understand and a concern they have. So I think if you can think about it, it's just the way they package themselves online.
Yeah.
They're doing that with their schoolwork as well. They're presenting a version of themselves in their thinking. And there may be moments when it's appropriate to use AI for various reasons, and then there are moments when it's not.
And I think they're curious. I don't want to speak monolithically again about all students, but I think students are generally, if you ask the right questions, they're curious, right? And so one of the things I think is important is they have had a model of education passed down to them that it's about getting information as quickly as possible and being able to spit that back, right? Or learning it, building a skill really quickly and being able to like demonstrate it really quickly, instead of thinking about it as something transformational, about deciding who, and so I think getting them to understand how learning works. When I talk to students about that, I'm sure, Erin, you felt this way because you've taught about how AI affects the way we write and how we think about writing. And when you get them thinking about it, they really do engage. And I think there's a way in which that at the beginning of the educational, maybe we have a philosophy of education class for every student their first year. Why are you here?
Retool the whole year. To learn class.
Yeah. Why are you here? And it can be philosophy of education, and then it can be like we can have Wayne come in and talk about how learning works, right? We could actually do it in social science too, of like, so why are you here? Why are you spending all this money? Like, what is this about? And then how does learning work? And then that said, because I do think they pay attention to that. And that's why some of them are starting to be resistant and starting to be worried. And they can push back and say, look, we have all this pressure. Like we have to, and I think we should listen as faculty to that. It's not something that's not real. But I think that could be really interesting of setting up a motivational profile for them to say, yes, this is going to be hard for me to resist, but it's something I care about. Now, not everyone's gonna do it. So Tobias, you're right. And so we should create structures that make it hard too. Like we do need to have, shouldn't just trust all of our students. Like I fully agree with that. But I think the more we can get students extensively thinking about the question of what it means to learn and why it's important, we may not get them all there, but maybe we'll get some.
One fun way is to reward the effort, right?
Yes.
And reward, and this is obviously my field's language, but reward the process. You know, like credit for the draft and credit for the feedback workshop, and not, de-emphasize the final product.
Yes.
Or emphasize that is also still just a draft, right? No piece of writing is ever finished, it's just due. So I think there are ways that you can build, take that incentive structure, which is still powerful, but like push it back a little bit in the learning process.
Before you go, it looks like you were thinking about another question. So before you do that, can I make the third point about this?
Oh, yes, sorry. I love that.
I want to make it because it's what you said.
Okay.
The third point is this is just everyday, regular educational research and ideas.
Yep.
The way AI works just is because it fits into what we already know about as the way education works.
That's right.
Except it's like 10 times better in this regard, in this one regard, because what really works is when you do adaptive learning, adaptive learning is based on the individual, where you target it for their interests, their skills, their particular place where they are, their abilities, and you target it. And what AI does is it makes that adaptive learning extremely efficient and easy to do and interesting. And so that's why this AI is having such a positive impact on people's skills, because it's enabling adaptive learning, which is what we really want to be able to do more of.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yes, of course. You don't have to ask me. Of course you can tell me what's wrong.
Well, no, it's not wrong. I was reading something.
Just incorrect.
Yeah. But I was reading something the other day that was really interesting. And I should say, just disclosure, like I actually use AI a lot. And so I think about it a lot and how it engages with me it helps me learn, it helps me think. And when I first started engaging with AI, I really loved that it would like tailor it to me and it knew me and it was great. But there is this other kind of purpose of education. Again, I'm getting very meta and philosophical about this, but one purpose of education, if we think there is a democratic purpose to education, is that we encounter things that aren't tailored to us. And so there is this slight worry that if the learning becomes like super tailored to you and your interests, that you never get comfortable with like, how am I supposed to figure out this thing that I'm not interested in, that is very different from me, and learning how to communicate. So it's just a kind of interesting how do we balance it? Because of course, yes, there are ways in which that's really good and important, but also we want to make sure we don't accidentally lose something that we didn't even know was important.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So I just think and who knows, there's no research on this necessarily being a huge problem, but it's just something for us to watch.
That's a really good point too.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right, Ryan.
The topic I was going to shift us to is very similar to what Will was saying, and I want to jump on a phrase that you used, Betsy, transformational. So we've centered a little bit of this discussion on replacement and what AI is potentially replacing, but can it also be transformational in the learning? Can it be can we do personalized tutoring or adaptive, or is that just all overblown hyperbole and all it is a cheat machine? Are there new ways we can use it in ways that the students can actually enhance their learning abilities?
So I'll have little to add that's super valuable here, except to say, to sort of reiterate a point, it's going to depend heavily on which area of learning we're talking about, I think. So,
Yeah.
with that.
Well, I think, we obviously don't have a true STEM person here, but at a liberal arts college, or liberal arts university,
Social scientists always get mad about that.
we do.
I'm not mad.
We have a lot of different disciplines.
I'm vetoing.
It's complicated. Anyway, and for it, I mean,
That's incredibly true. It's gonna depend on each discipline. Maybe some of the harder sciences, the physics and biology, go all in.
Those are the easy ones, but
where places like
the harder ones.
writing, there might be a little more of a struggle to find ways that students can really enhance.
well, I want to actually, this is interesting. I think it's because I do think many people, so students and just generally with people, the population, when they think about STEM, even though we don't have a physicist here, I do think it is worth thinking about why we think that in STEM versus the humanities, it would be easier to do personalized learning. So what is your intuition there? Like, why would it be easier in STEM to use it?
I'm trying to elicit your thoughts.
I mean, I think there is a thought that the way that you learn STEM is by memorizing things. But I think if you talk to to scientists, they would say, oh no, that's not actually the way.
Scientists.
Oh my God. I'm on either side, Will.
But I do think, and this goes back to the point that Will was making and that I made earlier, that part of what, and if there's any silver lining to this, which I don't know if there is to AI, is that it's going to force us to have these conversations about how learning works. And I do think we're going back to this issue of like, yes, for a long time, that is sometimes the way that STEM was taught, was memorize a bunch of stuff. But we also know that's not the way you memorize it and then you forget it, right? You're not actually learning the scientific method. You're not actually, so there is a way in which.
Where most of the labs, where do most of the labs happen on campus?
Right.
In those physical sciences.
Yes, in the physical,
because you got to experience it.
Right.
You got to do it to learn it.
Yeah, and so there are interesting questions about how do they connect that to the assessment and to the lecture-based course. But we're learning, and for a long time we've been talking about how to improve science education as well to make sure that students learn. And so I think, even in science education, we have learned that group work, that engaging with other humans is important. And so this is the one interesting piece about I always laugh when, even this happened during MOOCs too, or even before AI, the phrase personalized learning was often void of people. So it's a very funny phrase, right? It's personalized to you, but there's not another person involved. And that's an interesting thing to think about. To what extent do we need another person involved? And maybe we don't need another person involved, but what do we lose if we don't have another person personalizing it for us? And so, and how do we combine these things where we make sure we keep the personal, human element of education, but also have the 2 a.m. tutor if we want a 2 a.m. tutor? How can you combine those things without losing one or the other? And I will say, we had a student panel last year. We had students come and talk about their experience with AI. And the most interesting discussion, and I think I shared this with you, Ryan, was, because you were there. You were there, Ryan was there. Yeah. The most interesting discussion was actually about office hours.
Yes.
Because the students, they talked about things they didn't like about AI, they talked about things they did like, but when they were almost all in agreement that the best thing about AI was that they could use it instead of going to office hours. And then the faculty were like, whoa, oh no.
But the follow-on to that, and I've talked to many of those students post that, so I've talked to them again. Many of them said, well, I don't go to the office hours for the easy questions.
Yeah.
So I get those out of the way by having a conversation with an AI. I will go to the office hours when I want a higher level conversation.
Sure.
So maybe the number of office hours visits decreases, but the quality of the conversation increases.
Well, probably the question is, what's the point of the office hour?
Well, I just, sometimes you go to the library looking for a book and you find like 7 other books that you didn't know you needed to find or you want, and so similarly, I might have an easy question, but then I find that a lot of other things that I needed / didn't know I wanted but wanted to know come up. So that still worries me, even if it's an understandable and rational thought, like why bother the professor or get up and go all the way over there for an easy question. It's more can be lost and probably is than just Yeah.
Well, also, maybe this is particular to writing, but everybody writes, so it can't be particular to just my discipline. But I think that, when a student comes to office hours, it's not just like, help me fix this sentence or what is really my thesis here. It's also like me getting to know them and how they think.
Right.
And to go back to the point about the personalized tutor and everything and the value or not value of having an AI that knows you, like, okay, but it also just knows the patterns you've put in already, and if you do that long enough, it'll keep returning stuff that looks like what you did before. And students come to think of that as looking really great because it suddenly is very polished and organized, but they haven't tested it out on another person. And whoever helped you or whatever helped you with writing, like the end goal is always a public audience, even if it's just your classmates or your teacher, and then we all know that's kind of an artificial situation. But I've had so many students tell me, like, well, AI told me I'd get an A on this. Or AI said I'd be fine with it. I'm like, okay, but they're not in our context. They don't know the history of the class. They're not me or whoever else is doing the grading. And so I think that the loss of human connection is maybe, to me, the scariest thing. And one of the 3 core beliefs I put on my syllabus about writing is that it's not something we do in isolation. And students always resist that a little because I'm like, just do it alone. It's just for me. I'm like, yeah, but even then, you're writing for future you. Like, it's not ever just for you. And most of what you write is going out in the world. So you've got to think about the actual humans who are going to read this, and not just like any electronic or digital.
So would you put human connection as one of the core things about education that we value the most?
I do.
Yes, I would too. Yeah. And
why you pay $80,000 or more a year,
especially for Wake Forest. And I think for small, that's why we talk about small classes. And there is research, and particularly in higher ed, that the more time you spend in conversation with a faculty member, just conversation, not getting answers, but just the more time you spend in conversation with a faculty member, the more you have like all sorts of different success long term. in terms of flourishing in your life. And so what I think, and that's why I said, what's the point of the office hour is an interesting question. Because I do think, and this goes back to that, we need to have a philosophy of ed class for our students, is to also introduce them to that question. What's the point of an office hour? Because I do think if they have a view of education is I need information that I need to learn, then the point of the office hour is to ask a question. I would say, the point of the office hour is not to ask a question. The point of the office hour is just come talk to me. Like, and let's just chat. And I'm going to ask you about your life. And I'm going to say, what classes are you taking? Like, we talk a lot about mentorship at Wake Forest, and that's oftentimes office hours are the way into that kind of mentorship of just saying, hey, you might be interested in this book. Go read this, and getting them interested in ideas. And often they might come with a question. And so this is Tobias's point. And then we do that. But they don't know. They think they're coming to get a question answered, but we're really doing something much deeper than that. And so what worried, I think, a lot of us in that room was we totally get why the student would be anxious. This is also to say this is not a new problem. Right. There's lots of literature on students being anxious about coming to office hours. And so for a long time, I've shared with faculty that I make my students come to one office hour at the beginning of the semester. So because they're nervous to do it, but once they come to one, it's like, okay, this is going to be safe. I can come back. And so I get why the students, if they can have AI, and this just goes back to incentives. If it's easier when they're scared to do something, if it's easier to do this, they're going to do it. And it's not going to be the end of the world, but you miss those opportunities for building mentorships and connections with faculty. And so somehow we're going to have to, again, get them thinking about reframing what is the purpose of an office hour? What is the purpose of a class? What is the purpose of gen ed? Getting them to understand what we already understand. And if they're 18, they don't know. And so I think that could be really valuable for Wake, is to get our students to think about that early on.
I agree.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that Wake Forest does better than most universities, is that availability for those conversations.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and we want, many of the faculty that come here because we want that.
Right.
This is actually something that we want to do. We want to mentor students and who are curious and engaged and eager. It's not a burden on us for them to come and chat with us. And so how to convince our students of that, I think is important.
And that's just one component of this intellectual community that we're supposed to be, right?
Yes,
It's an important component, but I remember one student who came to office hours a lot. There was a student, an international student, who was in my class, and we have small class sizes at Wake Forest, who told me later, writing to me from service in the military, he had to take a year off, and was writing to me from out in like the combat zone at night, like wanting to talk about philosophy, and told me that
awesome.
I thought I was going into a class, and I was going to be like exchanging information or really receiving it. And he's like, and in the end, I realized I was part of this intellectual community, and I was like an integral component. The classes are small. My interactions were not just like, I was a node in this web of intellectual community, and the little nodes are people. And like, I think that's the way it should be. Yeah. That's really important. And office hours is kind of like a part of that whole picture. So chipping away at little pieces of that does worry me. And I don't think that it needs to chip that away.
And there's a way in which it can, and so just to, Ryan, to the student's point and your point, I don't want to just outright dismiss this idea of it prepares you for the office hour in an interesting way. So this could be, if you're super anxious about contributing to class, and somehow it makes you feel less anxious to have AI prepare you and say, you got this. Like, and that's the thing too, is AI will be very positive. Like, I'd be like, this is great. And if you need that, like, good. It'll give you your pep talk before class or something. Maybe that could be helpful. But it's just, I think we've seen with social media, with phones, that there are lots of unintended consequences of technology that makes certain ways of life easier, right? And so I think we just need to be very intentional of, it's going to make it easy for you to not talk to people. You have to be, this is important for your flourishing, that you go outside your comfort zone and actually talk to people, even if it feels like a waste of time. Even if, again, they don't tailor it to you and they have their own nerdy interests and you're like, I really don't care. Like, that's an important lesson to learn of how do you, if you don't like sci-fi, you got to sit through somebody talking about sci-fi for an hour or something like that. So, yeah.
We're literally in an echo chamber right here. We have a room that we have some echoing, but we have 4 fabulous educators here. How does that relationship, let's go beyond office hours, between the student and the educator change when the student can access information very quickly using artificial intelligence? So the knowledge transfer portion of education, or memorizing facts that might be going away. What is the role of the educator with the student? What is the student's role? I mean, inside the, metaphorical classroom or just the learning environment, what is the role of the educator now?
We talk about that a lot in my class because we say all the time that, information is everywhere. Like that used to be the thing that was difficult and, many people could not read or it wasn't accessible. Now information is easy, but attention is scarce, right? I mean, that's what everybody's vying for. And so I see part of my role is teaching them to focus their attention on particular things, whether it's a topic they're interested in or the placement of words on a page in certain orders. And I think that is precisely the thing that the chatbots can do for them, is arrange words on a page in a way that looks more or less like it's supposed to. So I think to train them to see the value in doing that work themselves, and not because the end product is better. It actually might not be, right? ChatGPT often writes a better paper than a typical college freshman, or at least a more polished one. But they haven't practiced the skills of judgment. Like, what is the thing that will communicate my idea? What is the evidence that will work? What is the genre or structure that will best get that to my audience? And so I teach them, this is a series of choices. And you have to develop that capacity for judgment, not by evaluating something that's an automated output, but by testing it out yourself. And I think, there does come a point when bouncing ideas off an AI may be useful or maybe more feasible, like if the writing center's closed and I'm at home asleep or something.
Right.
But I don't think they're necessarily ready for that early in college. I don't think most of them have yet the judgment or the experience or the practice digesting and manipulating long bits of prose or long bits of text. So for me, in first year writing anyway, I don't know. I don't know that AI is transformative in a positive way right now. I think it may well be later on in their academic careers, but I think early on, maybe not.
Can I push on that one? Yeah. So what if instead of just turning them loose with AI and saying, go do some back and forth with AI on your own, or you bounce ideas off on your own, which they may not be ready for, what if we instead make it part of our job to design systems where where it's actually targeted for their age, so that the way the scaffolding is working with AI is targeted at what they can handle at their age. Yeah. So helping them pick out words or helping them think about these, requiring them to think about these questions that you think they should be thinking about, which I also agree should be.
Sometimes I do things like that, but then it's more just have the AI generate some possibilities after you've generated a few on your own, and then I'll tell them to explain why this or that possibility is good or not so good. Sometimes I'll have them have AI write something really terrible, and they'll fix it up to practice revision. So I think there are ways that you can use it in a sort of exercise capacity or a practicing capacity. But students we always talk a lot about when in your writing process would you use AI? And I just don't have it do the thinking for me, but I have it help me brainstorm. That is the thinking. That goes back to your philosophy. We need to think about where's the friction? Because that I think we need to preserve. I think there are moments when, if you're just out of gas and need some more ideas for how to finish your paper, don't just have it write the end of your paper. Have it give you 10 options and then make a real choice. Ideally, when you have to articulate to somebody who's helping you learn, like a teacher or a peer. So I don't disagree. I think there are ways to incorporate it, but I think, again, back to motivation, the students won't do that part on their own. So I don't know what to do when they leave my class.
I was going to come back to that, but go. You want to add?
I was just thinking, I don't think any of us here are really making this assumption, but I don't think we should, which is that there is a better than other alternatives way of using generative AI in every area of education and higher education. I mean, in some areas, it might be it's really great. Use it there. It'll actually, improve the pedagogical outcomes that you have for your students to use it. And there might be areas, though, where it's a wash, or maybe it's not maybe we don't need to use it. Maybe it wouldn't be better. I'm just saying, we should.
What do you mean by area there? I just want to.
So teaching writing, or, teaching, acquiring the intellectual development involved in philosophy. I don't know. I'm not saying it's not. All I'm saying is we shouldn't assume that this tool should be used in every area. Maybe it can be, and maybe it can be effectively, but maybe you lose other things. Maybe in teaching area X, using some generative AI tools would be I guess equally good, but you would lose some other things. I'm just saying we shouldn't assume that.
So I think when and how you use it is totally context dependent. So that's why I asked about what do you mean by area. But I do think that, I mean, this analogy is very dangerous and scary, and people are going to get mad about it. But like, let's just imagine if we think about AI as like a friend or a colleague, right? Again, I don't think it is a friend or a colleague, but let's say we do. It would be weird to say, because I just think we all know that learning happens with other people, like that from engaging with other people, we can learn. And so while it may be the case that in certain contexts you should do things on your own, like it's not like, there are not some disciplines where you should never talk to another person, right? Like, there are ways in which like, oh, it would be useful for you to get feedback. And so I think I understand, I think I agree with you, Tobias, but I also think for me, the context is dependent on what is the specific skill you want them to learn, not discipline.
Right.
So every discipline should think about it.
Let me give you like an extreme example, and people will be like, that's a bad analogy. I'm just trying to highlight a principle.
Sure.
So suppose you're like a D1 football player. We have lots of stuff. And, you're trying to train your body physically, strength in various ways so that you can be excellent on the field. And then someone says, I see you, benching that 300-pound bar. Like, we have this little forklift that can do that. Obviously, the football player is like, well, that's dumb. Like, that wouldn't achieve the goals that I have for this. So just because we have that new tool that can do that thing, it will circumvent the actual goals. Now, I mean, and just since I brought that up, I mean, one, I think, difficulty, not just me, William Cochran and others have pointed this out, that generative AI has shown to us is that the connection between, let's say, the practices, the struggle, the difficulty with the football player, the connection to the goals is pretty clear and obvious. So like, using a forklift to do the bench press would be obviously silly. But that connection is much less clear to students. And, as an institution, broadly, not Wake Forest, but we've maybe not done so great at making that clear. And it's harder to make clear why the struggle, the intellectual development, writing, doing philosophy, psychology, all this stuff is going to make you a more flourishing human. That's just,
And particularly for students who are high achieving, who haven't had to have much struggle in their educational career, right? So they think that I've done well, I've gotten A's by like having an easy time of it. And so if there's struggle, and there's actually some research on this too, that sometimes students who are that way, when they experience struggle for the first time, they change their major. Because like, oh, this is a signal that I shouldn't be in this major because I'm struggling. And so they're especially going to, and well-intentioned. I mean, this is what I appreciate about your point, Tobias and Williams too, is that students, and I guess this is, Erin, your point, they're not ready. Are they ready for this? Because I think our bigger concern is not the students who are intentionally deceiving us. I mean, that's a concern. But it's the students who are trying to use AI to learn, and they are hearing Will's great stuff, like, oh, and even for me, there's ways that I can use it. This is great. I want to use it to help me learn, but they don't know enough about learning and the connection between why am I doing this assignment and what is the kind of struggle that is productive. And there's some struggle that's not productive. And so they don't know enough. And so we really have to help them. But when they're not with us, this is the biggest fundamental, like there's the structural issues of credentials and why students are in school and incentives that are a problem. But the other big structural problem we have is that most of the learning in higher ed is supposed to happen unsupervised without us there.
And much of it has to, I think. You just can't do everything in 3 hours a week.
Well, that's that's what I'm saying. The big issue is we need to be with our students more than 3 hours a week. That's the big blow up higher ed structure, thinking about is there a way in which we maybe need to be spending more time with our students rather than assuming that they can just do all this unsupervised. Now, of course, that's not going to happen anytime soon. There's a whole reason why business model will be chaos for higher ed. But I do think what's happening is faculty are saying, okay, well, I can do more in class. Great, fine, doing more in class. But then they're assigning less out of class. And then students are learning a lot less because they're not doing as much work outside of class. And so if that's the solution, is just not having them only spending 3 hours a week, that cannot be a solution. So we have to think of something else. And maybe there's some hybrid thing of where we have and my colleague Karen Spira in our office has been thinking about and writing about, is there some way of thinking of these human intelligence labs, because she was a language instructor. And so they used to have back in the day these language labs where you would go and put on headphones and practice. And she's like, could we create labs or something where students go and they practice, like a reading room or places where they can go and do the work where it's not crazy supervised, but a little bit more than when they're in their dorm. So this is not a solution, but I think we have to address the issue of unsupervised learning is really tough when they have access to these tools because we're not there to help guide. We can try to guide them.
Yeah, that's what
Good. Yeah, I'm done. I'm done. Yeah.
This is why I think we have to take this seriously and have these discussions, because I think if we just try to like motivate people, they're gonna end up doing the passive AI, and their skills are gonna go down.
Yep.
We can't just work on encouraging them by giving good speeches.
Right.
It's got to be more than that, and that's why we need to have the faculty have discussions about how we're going to do this, and recognize that if we just try to basically do the same thing we're doing now, but with some extra speeches, education is going to be in serious trouble.
Yeah.
We've got to figure out a way to address this issue with some real serious changes.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, people are going to use this AI in the passive way, and they're going to end up having their skills decline. And they're going to write better papers in college. They're going to get good grades in college, and then they're going to go out and try to write professional level writing, and they're not going to be able to do it. And so then they're not going to be able to get anywhere. So that's why we have to have these discussions.
I had a colleague here in statistics. I think I can share this, but she has students working with clients on projects, and her position is whatever the client's rule on AI is. So whether you can use AI is up to the client because it's their data, which makes good sense, right? And so these were upper level stat students who were working with a client that said no AI. And they didn't know how to get started because they had been using it to like think about how to structure the data. They were like, where do we begin? And these were advanced stat students because they had been using it like with well-intentioned and actually like partnering with it in great ways to do good data analysis. But they had gotten so used to using it that way that they couldn't do it on their own. And so how do we make sure that the students who are well-intentioned and using it in good faith still are building the skills they need to build in 3 hours a week also, which...
Right.
Well, I mean, think about writing a difficult paper. So, I mean, of course, I'm thinking about a philosophy paper. You can't do that 3 hours a week in class. There's no time for that and instruction and stuff. And I don't think the solution can be totally just to say, well, let's spend 6 hours a week with them. Because part of doing that kind of intellectual project is being on your own, wrestling with the ideas, banging your head against the ideal wall on your own. And that's part of like also what I think
But there are writing groups.
Requires.
We have writing groups.
But you do a lot of the writing. Look, I mean, at least for me, a lot of the writing and thinking is in your head or on the page. And that just takes time. And I don't think that can be fully, just supervised. And I think that could be bad. I mean, they're going to leave college never having had to do. I know you're not.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay,
I know you're not. But like never having had to do on their own.
Have the discipline to do their own. That's interesting.
I think what Karen's suggesting, and I think is an idea worth discussing and considering very strongly, is setting up labs on campus where they go in and they write by themselves, but they're monitored in a way that they're not able to use AI while they're doing it.
Right.
That's the kind of thing that I think Karen is thinking about.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
I think it's a wonderful idea.
The Writing Center has started offering some kind of supervised writing sessions where if you just feel like if you're on your own, you either won't do it or you'll get distracted. The tutor is not working with you.
Right, exactly.
They just kind of sit beside you to help keep you on task. The same way that like the HIs just write.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, to give you like a community of people who are going to support your work and keep you on task, but not like tutor you or instruct
Yeah, right.
or be
That's
a
right.
teacher in the room. And I don't know how popular they are, honestly. Probably not very, but they may not be.
She was also thinking about, because there are these stories about students who are like organizing no phone. Like, so in college campuses, like we're going to have parties where we all put our phones out, like, and because they know that they need to have accountability with each other. So that's a kind of interesting thing too, is that we may not even need to. It could just be a space where you all agree to go to read together, where you're going to make sure. And I had students in my first year seminar tell me that this is related, where they said because I was making fun of the fact that they don't ever study in their dorms. Like does not happen at Wake. They do not study in their dorms. So we always need to find more space for them to study. And they said, no, I prefer to study in the library. And I thought it was, back in my day, people like to be around people because it's fun and social. And they said, no, I prefer to study in the library because then I won't get on my phone because I'll feel judged by people looking at me on my phone.
Good.
Like they want to go to the library because they're surveilled. Whereas if they're at home, they'll just be on their phone the whole time. Which was, and then there's some interesting Tobias implications of they should learn how to not be on their phone in their dorm, right? So fair enough to say we want to make sure to teach them the discipline to do things on their own, but having a little bit of a space where they're all holding each other accountable for, we're going to do this on our own. Could be interesting. I mean, who knows if it will work, but could be interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to awkwardly just cut us short here.
Okay, you got to edit all this.
I am very much in a selfish manner, I would love to keep this discussion going for hours. This is
would
an
too.
incredible discussion. I am having fun and learning a lot, but I know you have much more important jobs to go help shape the mind.
I don't know. This is a pretty important question. These are important questions.
But I think our listeners are going to love hearing the thoughts and opinions. This is an incredible discussion. So
Yeah.
definitely thank you. And I would encourage our listeners to stay tuned as I think this is going to be wildly successful. I think we're going to have
Oh, good.
Let me say, yeah, I think this is a great opportunity this is why the CAT is partnering on this, is a great opportunity to highlight faculty talking to each other, of getting faculty to talk to each other about AI.
And cross-disciplines.
And cross-disciplines, and to really come together for the groups of 4 of us, but also for everyone who's listening as well, to hear how faculty are thinking about AI. So
I can't wait till we send this out to the whole faculty listserv.
And we can. I'm all about it. It will be great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, thank you for inviting us.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everybody
Yeah.
else. Great thoughts.
Yeah.
Thanks again to our guests, and thanks for listening to the Deeks.ai podcast. Please continue to follow the AI discussion by subscribing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And if you have any comments, questions, or want to join the discussion, please email us at deeks.ai@wfu.edu.